Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and today I'm going to talk to you about the Get Graphic Readathon. This was a readathon that I participated in from October 6th to the 8th, and so that was just a weekend, and like the name suggests, it was a readathon for reading comic books and graphic novels, which of course is my favorite format, and of course that means I had to participate. So I was really glad I did, because I am kind of just getting out of a slump and, reading comic books and stuff. I was already in the mood, so this was a good timing for me. I didn't complete all of the challenges for the readathon, but I did read quite a bit, considering that it was also Thanksgiving on this weekend, Canadian Thanksgiving, so there was family things as well as like having to bake. And in addition to that, I also discovered that my library carries the Great British Baking Show on DVD, so I ended up binging 2 seasons of that also on the weekend. So like my time was pretty much gone because I was doing something I probably shouldn't have been doing. I don't know why I am so obsessed with watching that show. I cannot explain that, but I don't think I'm alone in that either. I didn't end up vlogging for this, but I will kind of wrap up and tell you what I did read and what my thoughts were for some of these titles. So the first thing I ended up picking up was I Hate Fairyland by Scotty Young. I picked up Volume 1, and I also read Volume 2 just right after it. I ended up reading this because I do own it. It is in my collection, and it's something I haven't read before. I had picked it up originally for Booktubeathon. It was sort of a title that I read because it was so popular on BookTube, and I wanted to read a title that was really hyped on BookTube. It was a title that I hadn't got to for that readathon, but I really wanted to get to it at this point. I don't normally buy comic books before I read them, and I am very picky with my comic books, so I don't actually have a very large collection. Surprising considering what you see behind me, but comic books themselves, I have a very lean collection, so this is very unusual for me to have something where I have purchased it before I read it, and this will not be staying in my collection. Let's just say I intensely disliked this. I did read both volumes because they were in my collection, and I believe in reading all the books that you own, but it was not a pleasant experience. It was sort of like a hate reading, let's just say. The concept of this story is that there is a girl who kind of wishes that she could go to another world, and so she is transported to Fairyland and kind of sent on an adventure to find her key to her hidden door, and when she finds her key then she can leave Fairyland, and she's had this adventure as a child. Unfortunately she never finds her key, and so she ends up getting trapped in Fairyland and aging in this childish body. Time has passed. Over the comic, the time passes, and she becomes quite corrupt, and basically she just wants to destroy everything in her path in order to find this key to help her escape. She just wants to go home. So that is the plot, that is the concept, and that is all it is. There is nothing more to the story than those words. She blows things up, she murders a lot of things, she destroys things, she wants to go home, she looks for her key, she wants to destroy things, she murders things, she wants to go home, she looks for the key. That is all you're getting in this comic, and for me that's not enough. I don't like to read a concept without a story, and this is very episodic, but it's even unfulfilling because the character herself never is fully developed. Her sidekick is never fully developed. The characters around her die too fast, so they never get fully developed. So to me, I feel like it's very conceptual without any depth or result. In addition to that, I really struggled reading the art in this. There was a lot of times where I struggled to understand what the perspective is in some of these layouts. I struggled right from the 5th page. That's when I really lost interest in this, and it was sort of like the pivotal moment where she is falling down into Fairyland and ends up kind of crashing, and it should be this very weighty impact, but because of the way that it was illustrated, I lost my interest in it because I couldn't feel the impact of it. I didn't feel the depth or the weight or the gravity of that particular moment. And so there were many moments in it where the actual dimension and weight of the characters is completely lost because it is drawn in a way that feels like sort of like Nickelodeon cartoons from the late 90s. There's a very flatness to it, a very sort of just drawings on paper. It just feels like flat drawings. And, you know, it is nicely illustrated, it's beautifully colored, but it doesn't lend itself to weight, it doesn't lend itself to movement, and it doesn't lend itself to any emotional attachment whatsoever. And so I was completely lost, completely thrown out of this comic. I may be talking about this too much, and maybe thinking about it too much, but these are things that I noticed right away when I started reading this. So this will not be staying in my collection. I don't really recommend it, but I know that a lot of people really like this, and I know that when I mentioned that I was going to read this, I had a few people say that they were really excited because they love the series. I don't. The next series that I ended up picking up, I really was surprised at how much I liked it. I've seen it many times actually at the library when I have gone to look at comic books, and it's just one that has never appealed to me because I don't really like the cover design, I don't really like the particular art style, but I have recently read a title, Polina by Bastien Vives, and I really loved it, and this is the same illustration style, although a completely different story. In addition to that, it was recommended in a video by a fellow YouTuber, Samuel Trejo, who I really respect your taste in comics, and yeah, definitely anytime that you recommend something, I add it to a list, so I have a long list of comics that I am planning on reading because yeah, great recommendations, obviously. So I ended up picking up The Last Man. This is by Balak, Sanlaville, and Vives, and this is actually by three men who are, one is a French animator, one is a French video gamer or game designer, and one is a French comic book artist. So the three of them together have created the series. You really do feel the impact of video games and animation in this series. It's very dynamic, it's very action-packed, it moves really quickly, it pulls you along, the storytelling is amazing in it. It has so many twists and turns that are completely unexpected. I was caught off guard several times. It's amazing how much changes from this first volume until the fifth volume, which I also read in this readathon. So I was really impressed with this series. It basically starts out in sort of a medieval type setting where a kind of a boxing tournament, although it's sort of like fantasy boxing. You know, the characters do have some magical abilities, and it's about, you know, this young boy here on the cover, and he is sort of like the weakling student, and he wants to join in this tournament, and he ends up getting paired up with another weakling who ends up not joining the tournament because he gets sick or nervous or something, and so this man ends up showing up, and he also wants to join the tournament, but it actually happens to be a doubles tournament, and so he ends up becoming this young boy's partner in this tournament. It moves on from there. You end up finding out that the world that you were originally looking at is sort of like this secret Atlantean type world where, you know, you don't know how to get to, like, there's a secret crossing. The world that you cross from is not the world that you expect. It's sort of a Mad Max type world. It's all really kind of surprising. There's a lot of really grim aspects to it as well, which were a surprise. I just really enjoyed this, and I didn't expect it at all. It's an art style that I don't normally kind of respond well to. You can see here just sort of it's a little bit of a painterly. It's definitely using more kind of creative pen strokes, and it is all grayscale comic, so that is sort of like the art style that you expect or that you see in this comic. But if you haven't picked this up, or you've seen it and you've resisted it because you don't think it's for you, it's actually really good. Really recommend it. There are only 6 volumes, I think, published in English, and I do believe that the publisher for Second actually ended up dropping publishing of this. So there are more if you actually speak French. You would be quite fortunate because this is originally a French comic translated into English. But yeah, this was a significant difference from the first title that I read. So I ended up reading Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, and Volume 5. I was able to read through these quite quickly, which I was really pleased with, but also it was just, that's just the way that it was written. It was just written, it was such an engaging story, and it was so quick-paced, and there was just so much to think about. It never fully answers anything as you're reading it. There's so many questions, and then as soon as the questions are answered, there's more questions to something else, so it's just really, really well constructed, and I'm really disappointed that there isn't more, but I suspect it's because of this cover design, because it certainly held me back from picking it up. In between actually reading that, I also picked up a graphic novel, and that was Roughneck by Jeff Lemire. This is a story about Canada. It is about a family, a brother and a sister whose family has been broken because of emotional and physical abuse from parents, and then their kind of choices as adults into you know, abusive relationships and drug use and all of these really, really hard things that just sort of like their lives are spiraling out of control. Like everything that has come from the past is just sort of continues to manifest itself in the present time. This is a story about a brother who is an ex-hockey player. He is a half Cree man, I believe, and his sister ends up kind of coming to stay with him. He has been essentially kicked out of hockey because of his violent outbursts, and she has returned home kind of escaping from an abusive relationship, and so the two of them together are kind of like clinging to each other to find out how to resolve their situation, how to heal from this incredibly broken life. It is definitely a very hard look at life. It is not soft in any means. It's definitely unflinching. It is dramatic. It's slow. It is filled with anger and hurt and regret. It was really, really good. Definitely made me cry at the end, but that's not unusual. I cry in a lot of comics. But it was definitely very heartbreaking. I think it's a really good read. I definitely recommend it. It is, in my opinion, a story of Canada. It is a story. I have read a lot of comics written by Indigenous people about the Indigenous experience, especially this sort of spiral of family hurt and regret. And you know, this theme is not new, especially in comics about Canada's Indigenous people. And personally, I found I was a little bit more connected to it. I found myself, even though I sort of disliked the characters, I also really felt for the characters, and so I did have an emotional connection to this story. So I thought it was really good. I thought it was well written, it was well crafted, it's beautifully illustrated. Oh, we got a color page. Most of it is in tones of blue. It is Jeff Lemire's style, which you might be familiar with if you read comic books, and I recommend that you read it. I don't know that this is something I'd want to read more than once, or maybe more than twice. It's not something that I would necessarily put into my collection, but it is a really, really good title, and it's definitely worth reading. And then to lighten things up, I ended up reading Volume 1 of Fuku Fuku Kitten Tales by Konami Kanata. This is just a story about a grandma looking at her elderly cat and saying, "Weren't you cute as a kitten?" and then a bunch of incidents of the cat as a kitten and learning to be a cat. That's basically what I could say about it. Incredibly harmless, super cute, really, like, if you're a cat person, definitely is a title for you. If you have small children, this is a very appropriate comic for them. You know, there's nothing in it that is scary or mean or hurtful. It really is just about a single young cat living with a grandma and their sweet kind of life together. So really, really recommend this. It is really, really cute and definitely lightens up the mood, especially after a heavy topic like Roughneck. And then the last thing I read I didn't actually complete, but that was about 50 pages of Uncomfortably Happy by yeon-sik. I will end up kind of moving further into this, hopefully sometime during this week, because it is a title that I had actually checked out before I had planned to do this readathon. It was the title I was picking for my over 300 pages comic. But I just wasn't feeling it. It was a little bit slow and I had other things to do, get ready for Thanksgiving and stuff. Essentially it is about a couple who are living in an apartment in Seoul, I believe, and it's just, you know, mayhem, noise, and the man is sort of a stay-at-home worker. He draws comics. I don't know if it's actually the author himself who he's writing about. I still haven't looked into finding that out, but he is finding it really difficult to concentrate to get his work done because of all of this noise and crazy atmosphere. And so when they are sort of apartment hunting, they ended up buying a house sort of in this secluded area in a mountain, and then sort of beginning to realize that maybe they've made a mistake. Maybe this isn't the place that they should have been after all. They hadn't really thought it through. So it is sort of talking about learning to live the country lifestyle and what that really means. So I was enjoying it so far, but I did find it a little slow and I was busy doing other things on the weekend. So unfortunately I didn't finish this. And then the only title that I didn't get to from my TBR was Will Eisner's A Contract with God and Other Tenement Stories. I really, really want to read this. It will get read sometime soon, hopefully before I have to return it to the library, but it just looks stunning. It's beautiful, and I can imagine that I'm going to love this, and I suspect want to add it to my collection. So yes, I am definitely looking forward to reading this, but I just didn't get a chance to read it on the readathon. Well, I probably had a chance, but I was watching Bake Off instead. So this is what I ended up reading for the readathon. That's 9 books and 4 separate titles. Anyway, I'm really glad I participated. I enjoyed myself reading all these titles, even if I didn't care for all of them. I'm glad that I had a chance to read them and finally get them off my TBR. And, you know, some surprises and some really good titles just really kind of make readathons feel so satisfying. So I'm glad I participated. Thank you so much to the host for hosting. It was a lot of fun, even though I didn't get a chance to participate in the Twitter. I will try my best to do that next time. I always seem to miss out on the Twitter stuff. Anyway, thank you so much for watching my video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.